Welcome, everybody. This is the third in a series, and I guess there'll be at least a fourth one, and we'll see how it goes. We've got plenty of volunteers that want to show off their stuff, which I love, so it makes it very interesting. So this is the third in a series of show and tell, guys. Before we get started with our first presenter, take a look at the pictures up on the screen. Now that I've got about 32 of you here. If you can name all four of those home layouts, you will win 3 commemorative cars: a 2017 Black Hopper, a 2018 50th anniversary, I guess that was a box car, right? And then a 2020 Black Gun. I'd love to do the tank car and give all 4, but I don't have any of the 2019. They were so popular, they sold out. So that's what you need to do. Send your answers to me in an email. That's the only way we'll accept them. showdirector@amherstrail.org. And if you can get all 4, you will win these commemorative cars. So let's get started. Our first speaker, guys, you've all read the write-ups. Russ Berry has an amazing, even though I've heard it twice already, Russ, and I want to hear it again because it is really very cool. Guys, you should see, and you you will see what Russ has done with a DeWalt toolbox and DCC tools. So it's literally a DCC toolbox. So Russ, let me head down and find your name in the list. And Russ, I'm assuming that's you with just the word Russ. So I am making you the presenter. Let me see if we can see your screen, Russ, and give me a sound check. Yep, I got your screen. Russ, can we hear you? Can't hear you. Can't hear you yet, Russ.
How about now?
Yep, gotcha. You're on.
Okay. All right. Good evening, fellow model railroaders. I'm going to present a little presentation, some slides here of my DCC toolbox. My objective when I started this was to build a self-contained DCC tester and program in a secure, easily transportable case, so I could carry it to friends' layouts if they needed work on their locomotives, or take it to the big model railroad hobby show. So I'm going to show you. I started out with a 22-inch DeWalt toolbox. It provides a rugged plastic enclosure with a one-touch positive latching top and a sturdy handle. When you open on the top, there's an insert inside, and this is the top of the insert and shows the little hatch in the middle there, and I'll explain all those things that are on there in a few minutes. When I take the hatch cover off, in the well in the center, I've got all the things that I need. Starting on the right-hand side, I've got my NCE power cab paddle. I've got cables to connect the the Loc Sound programmer and the NCE USB interface. And then I've got a railroad amp meter and a cable that's been modified to work with the Anderson power poles. There's a computer power cord there, some USB cables, and then the upper left there is the Bachmann test stand rollers and a pill bottle that I keep them in, and I'll show you those later on. All right, this is the top of the box, and where all the working connections are. And I would start on the left-hand side there. A is where the computer cord plugs in, and there's an on-off switch that controls the power, and it plugs into a 120 volt wall outlet. B is a 120 volt outlet that I have so that I can plug my laptop in here if it needs charging. And there are also those little kind of look like white dashes on that outlet are USB ports. So I have the capability to also to charge USB things like my phone or tablet at the same time. C is the outlet for the USB interface. The B end of the cable plugs in there, and then the other end of the USB cable plugs into one of my USB ports on my computer. H is my test track, an piece of HO scale test track down there. And on the end of each end of it, I've got a KD 206 insulated coupler height gauge, and I've got them mounted on a post with a spring. So when I'm not checking the actual coupler heights on a locomotive, I can pick it up, turn it around 180 degrees and put it back down, and it ends up as a bumper. So when I'm testing locomotives, I don't have it constantly hooking up to the couplers when I'm running it back and forth. Okay, the other side of the hatch is D is where the power cab panel for the NCE power cab. The E is the load programmer there, and it's all plugged in the power and track. F is a pair of control switches. Only the left one right now is wired. The other one's for future expansion. You can only have one, either the NCE power cab or the load programmer connected to the track at a time. If by some chance they were ever to get both connected at the same time, you'd have 28 volts in there instead of 14 volts, and you'd be letting the smoke out of the decoders. So it's got a rocker switch there with a center off position that I can either select the load programmer or the NCE power cab. Now this just shows it all set up, all plugged in with my laptop, all set up, and I've got MRI up on the laptop and also the load programmer software. So if I'm doing a group of locomotives, I can switch back and forth depending on which decoder is in the locomotive. All right, this shows all set up with a locomotive on the test track, and you can also see the RA amp meter in the background is plugged into the G is, I'm sorry, I didn't explain that. That's an Anderson power pole outlet that's got track power, and I can plug the ramp meter in there instead of holding it on the tracks to get track reading. I can also measure the ampage when I'm testing a locomotive to find the stall amperage or selecting, making sure I have the right size decoder. Plugged into the Anderson power pole, I can plug a lead in that's got alligator clips on, and I could clip it to other track, like a Z scale, G scale, N scale. That happens to be my old HO test track. I didn't have any other gauge track laying around handy. You can see where the power cab is plugged into it. I've got engine driver on my phone. I have not got it set up with this, but you can use the engine driver app on your phone to be a throttle with this system. I haven't gone through and got the server and everything all straightened out yet and working. This shows the back side of the hatch. If you flip it over and plug it in, I've got my two DCC decoder testers, and I'll go for a close-up. This is the back side of the bottom side of the hatch. On the left is Low-Sound's or ESU's decoder tester. It has a motor on it. You can see the brass flywheel there, and to the left of it, the black circle there is a speaker. The white row of LED lights going vertical underneath the flywheel on the motor are the function indicators for F1 through F10 on your throttle. Along the bottom and at the very top, and there's one on the left-hand side, are places that you can plug in the different, anything from a 21 pin to an NEM 8-pin to 9-pin or the hardwired ones. You can plug them in and connect them to test them, so you can test your decoders. And in the case of those where you're like a Low-Sound and you're downloading a file, you can load the sound files on them, test them, make sure the decoder's all working like you want to before you go ahead and plug it into the locomotive. This way, you know, if you do run into trouble, it wasn't the decoder. It was working before you put it in the locomotive. The small green panel to the right is an NCE decoder tester. You could use that one with another motor attached to it and a speaker, but it doesn't have as many handy outlets on it. What I use that for is doing stationary decoders. There are cables that came with it. You can plug them into the stationary decoders and program them before you crawl underneath the layout and plug it in. You know that it's working right. Now, I pulled the insert out of the toolbox and laid it on its back so we can see the underside of it where all the wiring is hid. On the far left, of course, is the 120 volt. There's an outlet there where I've got the wall warts for the local programmer and the NCE power cab plugged in. So anytime that the power is turned on to this, those two items are powered up. F is the arrow is pointing at the USB interface, which is underneath. You don't need to see that. There's no indicators on there, and other than that, it's connected. And G is just the terminal strip with plastic covers on it to protect those heads, and that's where the track power comes out of the side of the rocker switch, and the wires coming out of there go to the power poles and to the to the NCE power cab and the low sound programmer. That's where the track power is all in that terminal strip. It's coming out of it. And the rocker switch controls which one, either NCE power cab or the low programmer, are controlling the power. This is a picture of a locomotive. Happens to be a Bachmann locomotive sitting up on the Bachmann test roller stands. This is good for running in a locomotive when you first get them. I could, by shutting the power off on this, actually connect the transformer with alligator clips to it and run a locomotive and run it in that doesn't have a decoder in it. But the nice thing about these decoder stands is the ability to sit and run an engine all the way up to full power and make sure everything's running good and smooth in the engine. It's also great for doing steam locomotives when you're trying to program a decoder to get the chuff sequencing down. You can't do that in 22 inches of track. It's nice to put them on the stands, and I've got 8 of them. And if you need more, you can. They're expensive, but I wouldn't have a problem buying another set of them to make sure that I can support all the wheels on a locomotive, on a steam locomotive in the tender. This is a picture just showing that you can use this insert or this insert to the toolbox outside of the DeWalt toolbox. This is set up with the computer and everything else with that locomotive up on the test stand. When we're all through testing and playing around and everything's packed up, put the hatch back on, close the lid, and we're all done. John, it's back to you.
All right, Russ, that was fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, maybe
nicely done. And yes, true. Now, what I'd like to know is, when are you taking orders and how much will it be?
I haven't even figured that out today. I was working on my presentation. I will make up a list of all the components and prices that I got. I ordered most of this stuff through Amazon, except for the Loke Sound and the NCE power cab. I had those.
Cool.
Everything else, bought the toolbox at Home Depot.
Great. Nicely done, Russ. Thank you very much. I love it.
All right.
Now, guys, you should see my screen up on the screen again. Just for those of you that missed it, and I probably will repeat it too many times, but if you can identify the 4 layouts, and I have just about 40 people here now. If you could identify the 4 layouts, you win a 2017, 2018, 2020, or 2020 commemorative car. So you win 3 cars. Send the 4 answers to me in an email. And now that everybody's here, we're well into this, I'll give you a hint. 2 of the layouts that you see there, and I'm not going to tell you which, but 2 of those layouts have been dismantled. So 2 of them no longer exist, but only within the last 2 years. Hint, hint. So identify all 4, and you could win 3 commemorative cars. I sound like a shopping channel. So, guys, next up is Joe Biagioni. our newly elected president, and I'm going to make Gary's computer, which is where they're running from, the presenter. So Gary, take it away, and let's do a sound test as well.
Can you hear us?
Yes, Joe, I got you, and I see your screen. Take it away.
Well, hi all. How are y'all doing? All right. I want to have a confession. Now that I'm president, and you can't get rid of me. I'm an alcoholic, as it is, right? And I'm a big lover of alcos, and maybe you didn't know that, but I'm sure everybody did. But this is part of what started my railroad. I got to figure out where I'm clicking. Over here, Gary.
Oh, wait, no. One more. Wait a minute. Let's go to slideshow.
Oh, we had to click slideshow on. Sorry. I'm new at this.
All right, you're good. You're good, Joe. Don't worry.
Okay. All right. My railroad is the Adirondack and Lehigh Company. All right. And if you take the letters, it spells out ALCO. All right. It started a long time ago. I'm a product of the Bolton Nashua Valley Railroad, where I met many people, and I started a little bit of operation there, and then being with Gary's Railroad, which is the Cheat River, I started to learn more about operation, and I liked it. So we're going to go on a tour, a quick tour of the Adirondack and Lehigh Railway. We got to do a couple housekeeping here. We got a couple things on the screen. We're going to see if we.
No.
We don't want that, Gary.
No. Come on, wake up.
Hang on for a second, guys. Hold on with us. We can only see half the screen. Okay, so I'm a college student from New York State, so I love New York. So the Adirondack and Lehigh Railway is ex-Conrail lines, and it goes from Montreal to Harrisburg. Places I actually went to school in upstate New York, up at a place called Paul Smith's. But we could see this, we knew of this railroad going by, and it was actually run a lot then. The route from Montreal follows the Conrail line to Syracuse. From there, it runs to Auburn, New York, and it turns south to Sayres, PA, following the former Lehigh Valley, right? At Sayres, the line connects to Wilkes-Barre, which is at the end of the Alco Railroad ownership. And from Wilkes-Barre to Harrisburg, Alco uses the D&H trackage rights. Well, the D&H is my favorite railroad. I model that mostly 80% of my locomotives. All right. There's a branch line on the railroad to Ogdensburg to service a large petroleum facility. I'm a big fan of tank trains, so I wanted to have that on the railroad when we started building it. And then there's a branch line, a secondary run from Norwood Junction to Rouse Point, New York, connects to the D&H again. Intermodal and auto loading facilities is located at Rouse Point, which is good because I'm a big piggyback guy. All right. The Alco Railway also uses D&H track rights from Rouse Point to Binghamton as needed. A branch line that runs from Adams Center to Boonville, New York, to service a large wood product industry. So in New York State, Boonville is the wood choppers' capital of the state. And they hold a big wood choppers festival every year where the still competition comes in. It's a big time, and I spent many years up there running fast saws and chopping lumber and stuff like that when I was younger. So I got the map here. You can see up there past Quebec, the yellow line comes down. So that's the Adirondack and Lehigh coming all the way down and down into Wilkes-Barre, about just south of Scranton, right? And we have a couple of the blue lines as my track rights from in there. And we actually, I drive Gary Muncie nuts because I built the layout first, and then I said, oh, I wanted to follow the map. Well, that's not the way we should have done it, but we were able to come up with the route that we wanted in the towns and where we travel. a lot of time spent with it, almost as much time as putting in track and trying to figure out where we go. Right. So this is where it started. That's my barn, right? I own my own landscaping business. I needed a barn. My wife said I could put up a barn, this and that. And she didn't know what I was doing on the second floor, right, where those big French doors are. And she always asked me, am I going to put a porch out there for her? So that's the home of the Alco Railroad. We started this, I think, in 2007. 2017, I'm sorry. The building started in probably 2013. It was all built by me and my guys that I work with. Why the Adirondack Railway? Well, Gary and I, he helped me out a lot. We were trying to figure out, he knew the route that I wanted, and it became, the Adirondack area is something that I lived through for the 3.5 years I was in college. And so that's a big part of my life. So then we came up with the Adirondack and Lehigh, okay? And it's also, I have a love for Alcos. Most of my collection, probably 90% of it, is Alco locomotives, whether it's brass or plastic. In the beginning, when the RS3s came out, I was the happiest guy in the early 80s, because now I could buy a plastic Alco that was really a nice running unit. But I did have, and I still do have, carry locomotives and Hobbytown of Boston that were all Alcos. And that's the only, when I started railroading or model railroading, that's the only way I could get an Alco. Okay. So from my college in upstate New York, where I majored in pulp and paper, I wanted a wood industry, the paper industry, an essential part of my railroad, okay? New York is Alco country. That's where Alcos come from. They were, the mainstay. They were made there and everybody owned them, all right? From 83, when I started chasing trains with Carlton Romer, we went out to the D&H and we saw Alcos. We would chase them all over the place, up and down, Binghamton to Syracuse. I mean, we were all over the place chasing Alcos, right? I mentioned earlier my influence is Gary. Well, Gary being dispatcher for Pan Am for a bazillion years, he loves to do switching. So I never was a switching guy. I was always the Christmas tree type of running guy, put a train on and run on circles. Well, I've changed, and I started doing more with his railroad, and he would let me run certain trains so I wouldn't screw it up and screw up his car cards. But when I slowly started that, and I applied that to when I was building the Alco Railroad. I wanted to have products shipped from here and moved over to another building or another area on the layout, okay? Grain, coal, paper. When we first started this, we wrote down on a yellow pad of paper what industries we wanted. That was probably the first thing we did before we put any track plans down, is when we started building this, we said, what industries do we want, and where, why, how? Some of them we did because I had cars that would be appropriate for the propane or petroleum products. Okay, so I wanted a propane plant. I wanted a petroleum plant. The other, there was other things I wanted just because I liked it. I wanted the wood industries. Road salt. That's always a great car to have. Food products. I didn't have a lot, but I got a brewery on the layout, and I don't drink beer, right? And food products. I got a Adirondack soda. So there are a lot of commodities that I originally picked out when I started doing the layout. Let's go over here. All right. So this is in February 2017. That's myself, Carlton Romer, and John Flanders. So this is, we finished the room, top to bottom, plastered, put the lights in, painted it sky blue, and then we came in and started assembling everything. It's still a work in progress, right? So this is the other side, from one side to the other. And this is, it's not really, it's two-tiered, but it doesn't have a lot of track that's underneath the decking. We do have some as we go through, but I didn't want to have it two shelf layouts, and plus I couldn't have it because of the knee wall arrangement of the building. All right, so this is the beginning of our main yard, which is Sears. Was our centrally located place. It was one of the first parts that we put up, and we wanted to have a large storage area that would take switching, and you'd have to switch the trains out. So most of the stuff as it goes around will come here first and be sorted out of this yard. This is looking the other direction. And as you can see where the level is, I had certain things that I wanted to do. That is part of the Y. I got a very large Y in the middle of this, just for turning locomotives, and I like Ys. Every railroad needs a Y. So we did it all on plywood with 1x5 base pine. The plywood's 5/8, and then as you can see, the straight track, I ran it on lattice board. That comes back from my old days at New England Rail. We did a lot of work on lattice. It kept the track nice and straight and gave a real firm surface for tacking things down. The Bolton Club was on, was hand laid, a lot of it. And of course, that took a great deal of time. It was great to learn how to hand lay track, but we did everything with flex track for this railroad just to speed things up. All right, so this is later on. This is the Sears engine facility. That brass sanding tower I purchased at the show in Springfield, probably back in, I don't know, 85, 87, something like that. And I've had it, and I wanted always to build a railroad around it. So I'm finally got the chance to do that. All the locomotives in front of you, the Alcos sitting there in the sanding tower, the Adirondack and Lehigh scheme. It's kind of a takeoff of the demonstrator scheme that the Alco used for many years, especially in the Century Series locomotives, right? And yes, for those out there looking, those are Chevys back there, the yellow Susquehannas, but they're Carlton Romers. They're not mine, right? And then this is the start of my first Helix. Now, just prior to this, I was over to Clark's house, and he had this colossal Helix, and I fell in love with it. I'm like going, man, I got to put a Helix on my layout, right? So that's what I did. So Clark was my inspiration there. And then you can see the plywood to the left on the bottom. That's where the Helix is going to end up. Let me see if I can show you. All right, so that's almost in the same spot. They're finishing off the top. The Helix goes around, I believe it's like 3.5 rotations, and it goes down to the northern terminal or more northern yard, which is Montreal, it is underneath the layout, but all it is the staging yard. All right, so this is as I'm laying track in Harrisburg, which is on the other end of the railroad, right? And it is just the staging yard also. And what we're trying to do here with this is on Gary's Cheat River Railroad, he has a Harrisburg. And we made my railroad have a Harrisburg. And we're going to do an interchange with the Cheat River. And mostly it's coal. And it's destined for a power plant, which is the Mohawk Niagara plant. Again, I changed the name so I wouldn't be liable. It's not Niagara Mohawk, it's Mohawk and Niagara power plant. And what Gary and I are going to do is swap loaded coal from his mines. I'll operate one night at his house, bring it over to here, place it in Harrisburg on my railroad, and then when we operate here, we're going to deliver it up to the power plant, and vice versa. We'll go back and forth. So it's kind of, we've seen this before in MR, and a lot of people have done it. A pretty neat way that the two of us can interact with each other's railroad. Right. Oh, and this is the Mohawk Niagara power plant in the picture. And if you see a lot of these buildings, my buddy John Flanders loves to build buildings. You have a building you want built, John will build it, right? So he's built a number of these buildings that are here. And the back two tracks here are the tracks for the power plant. And this is International Paper. It's on the north side of the barn. It's in a big section, and it's a large building. We actually took the paper mill and doubled it to make it almost 40 inches long. My areas are a tremendous amount of industrial switching area. I don't have a lot of scenery, even though I do get some places that it will be, but I'm not rolling through the countryside and stuff. Mostly you're going to go from one area to the other of industrial areas. Right. So the paper comes from the paper plant, which is on the far side and the left of this all the way over to this gray building here, which is International Paper Mill is it coming from, and this is a paper product industry, the one that's got the rail box car underneath it, right? This is Tonawanda. It's got a lot of switching in it. That's a bakery right there in the center with the yellow doors, and that's from what we've seen in Rutland when we go to the show up there. They have a bakery right there in the center of town, and they get cars with of grain in, and we I'm going to send things out from this bakery in boxcars. This is just the beginning. This is our train operating instructions. This is the local freight from Sayers to Tonawanda, which is the one place we were just looking. Right, we'll have several of these for different locations. Instructions to go through of what you're going to do, pick up, switching it. Tonawanda includes Interstate Battery, International Bakery, Consolidated Paper Products, which was the big gray building. And we'll have that, and we're also going to use car cards as we go through and operate this as close to real as we can. This is a map of our area that we were just looking at it. To the left is Tonawanda. It's the lower area. The Millen is the higher area where we have the Mohawk Niagara wood chip power plant, and we have the International Salt, and a place that comes from the old Bolton Train Club is Joe's Junk. Right. This is Boise Cascade Wood Products in Boonville, New York. So this is the big sawmill. To the left will be where the logs come in, offloaded out of rail cars or off of trucks. On the right will be the 3 tracks in the building will load box cars, and then the very 2 tracks way over will be wood chip cars that will go to the Mohawk Niagara power plant. Right, the wood chip material will be in several different types of cars, and some of it will go offline, maybe as far as Montreal, and some of them will go to the power plant. The 3 cars in the middle for wood products, and if you look at the orange building on the top over here, and we go to the next slide, that's where a lot of the wood products are going to go. That's my Home Depot distributors in Sayers. Okay, that's a custom built plywood building that myself and John Flanders put together with styrene on it, and then we scribed it. It's pretty modern for my layout. It's one of those concrete poured on the ground, stood up buildings to make a giant warehouse. That guy's about almost 48 inches long. All right, and if you look to the left, that's where the center beams will be offloaded and brought into the building, and the box cars in the front will be for other roofing or material, sheetrock, and products that can't travel in bulkhead flats will be offloaded there, and everything goes out of here and tractor trailer trucks, which is a set of doors on this end and then on the other end. Right, the Western Maryland cars in the front, I borrowed from Carlton. I know they're grain cars, but that's going to be our plastic pellets facility when we're done. The building in the back that's blue and it's kind of leaning, well, that's going to be a Maytag plant for making washers and dryers. It'll have the product shipped out by rail, and then coiled cars will be brought in to that area for assembly. And here, this is you're looking at the power plant, right? Station 4, and it will receive loads of wood chips and brought through in the coal dumper. That section there that in the front of the power plant is where the wood chip pile will be. The aqua green building in the left side, that's going to be my salt. All right. So that's going to be the salt barn when I'm finished with it. The cars that are just above it are the salt track. You can tell because they're all the rusty ones. And the building, the brown building in the middle there, well, you need a DPW building to spread the salt, the road salt. So that's going to be the area's DPW shop. They won't have railroad service, but they'll have plenty of salt to move. And this is my second helix on the layout here. And this drops me down lower underneath it. So the track that curves around the salt building and the DPW building drops down to the helix, and it goes to the lower section, which is it's just the storage yard in Harrisburg. So that's kind of, you have to go around that curve to get down into Harrisburg. So this is Romer Brewing. It's a Budweiser plant, which is in the center, and then the long building against the wall is a furniture factory. Right now it says Heritage Furniture. I don't know if it'll change, but Romer Brewing will bring grain from the grain facility, which is on the other side of the layout, and the furniture factory will get wood from the Boonville mill, which will work out real nice. So we have a start and an ending spot for most of the cars that we're going to be running on the layout. It takes a village to build this. You don't realize how much. This place is a team effort. So I got to say thanks to a lot of people that helped me out, and hopefully, if I say thanks enough, they'll come help me finish. Right. So this is John Peters. He's you all know him from the club. He's here working on switches and stuff at Evans Mills. He's been a big help. Let's see. So John, if you're listening, thank you. All right. The smiley face guy, the funny face one with no hair, that's John Flanders. He loves to do buildings. 80% of my buildings are built by him. And then he tells me the ones I build, how to fix them, right? The guy at the desk, that's Carlton Romer. I've known him since 1983 when I first joined the Bolton Club. And we're buds, so he loves to do decoders and things like that. So if he's not laying track or putting track line in, right there, he's working on a decoder on something that we were going to run. Or maybe he's putting in a battery. Looks like, yeah, he's got a battery right there. All right, so that is Arthur Caparelli there. He helps a lot. He's also building his own pike, as he calls it. Arthur is just for pure entertainment. He keeps us laughing, keeps us there. So we let him bang a nail or two here and there, but not too much. he can cause trouble, as you can see. Right? But and again, he's hamming it up. So thank you, Arthur. Right? The guy with his face buried in the track, that's Bob Marshall. Hey, Bob. Um, he helps with our electrical, gives us insight. He's a great help. He actually has his own layout at home, but he's always willing to help me out or Gary out at the Cheat River, right? The guy holding the light string, that's Greg Moss, right? And I got this light system at Home Depot, and Greg loved it, and he put it in. Actually, he had an article in the 8 and Sand with it. So Greg's been up there a lot, and he's helped me quite a bit. I do appreciate it. You really need your buddies to help you build this. So in this picture, that's to the right is Gary Muncie Jr., right? He lives in Ohio now, but when we get a chance, he's always up helping. On the far left watching, that's my son, Michael, right? We call him vice president of the organization. And then this guy here, right? Gary Muncie, he's now putting the track in for Montreal, which he put together on top, and then we slid it underneath, all right? He's been a great help, teaching me how to operate and teaching me other things. I take care of him, though,
Send me a bill.
That's right. We work together on this, and a lot of the ideas and stuff that I've got here and things I want to do is from Gary. Okay, so it works out well, and it's a great collection of guys. So if you haven't met this guy, this is my head custodian, Michael Biagioni. I'll have him at shows here and there. Everybody knows him. He's always a great help, and when he's not helping, he sits there and he's listening to his tunes. And that's pretty much all of me. Thanks, guys. If you know what, I'll have an open house, I hope soon, and we'll get you up for real, and then we'll get you to operate some engines. All right. Hey, till the next time. Hopefully we get together in real life pretty soon. I'm planning on it. Okay.
Joe, thanks very much. That was fantastic. I appreciate it. It was great to see how far you've come since I was there. It's come a long way, so it's great.
Thanks, John.
Hey, everybody, next up is Mike Tylick. And Mike, let me find the list. Let me find you on the list so I could give you a presentation rights. Guys, while you're looking at that picture, those 4 pictures are layouts, and if you can name them all, you'll win 3 commemorative cars. You probably heard me say it too many times now. So, Mike, I am going to give you presenter rights. You should have them. And Mike, go ahead and accept the share. And there you go. And we see you. And I am unmuting you, Mike. You should unmute your own line, please. Should be a button to unmute your microphone at your end, Mike. Yo, Mike. There you go.
That works now.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm on it.
You're on the air, Mike.
I'm on the telephone. I won't give you the sob story about how the new computer's microphone doesn't work. But anyway, I'd like to thank you guys for having me. And this is a story about building models between wood and styrene. It all started when Andy Reynolds, who's the railfront coordinator for the hub division of the National Model Association, it's a meeting every once a month. They meet on Friday nights and have shows like many other people do. And he decided to do a series on building a diorama for an achievement award for the NMRA. And the first part of this are pictures he took of the model he built. Now, one thing about Andy, those of you who know him, if there's an easy way and a way that takes longer, you know which one he's probably going to choose, which is the one that takes longer. So I'm going to click the thing and we'll see if the slideshow's running, and yes, it is. And here's the title. But what we're doing in particular is it's this little freight shed. By the way, this diorama is based on a real place. It's for a an award they call the Prototype Model Award, where you build a scene of a prototype scene. And what you need is it needs 4 buildings that are in the scene in real life. Now, one thing about the models are they don't have to be really incredible models. They have to be reasonably well done, but if they look like the real buildings, they're fine. They're not judged like a structure contest. But anyway, we built this shed, and Andy spent a long time. These are his construction photos. So the first part of this is really by Andy Reynolds. And Andy loves doing board by board. And he loves building things very much the way real ones are done. He made a drawing of the building. He lays out the beams. Okay, he didn't do the full stud work, but he did do beams, and he lays boards on them and trims them off. And very laborious, but very nice looking. He painted those. He laid the battens on over it, so it's not board and batten siding. It's boards and battens, just like the real one. Hopefully, I think these are laid on for the photo. I think he paints everything before it goes on, or at least I would imagine he does. Here's the framework for his platform, and it's built very much like the real platform. You could probably put lead weights on it and work just fine. And here are more construction pictures where he builds the frame and he builds it up and he puts the boards and he paints the pieces, and it works pretty well. It makes a nice model. Now he's laying the deck on. One thing that works well with board by board, I think, is that you notice all the pieces are put on oversized and then they're trimmed off. He doesn't try to cut pieces precisely to fit because you probably will never really be able to do that. Here's another picture. Now, Andy carries it to the logical extreme. Instead of putting a piece of cardboard or a piece of styrofoam for the roof, he builds the roof up out of boards, very much like the real one. Then he'll end up putting roofing on it, and all this stuff helps because he also wanted to use this model for the achievement program in structures, where the more work you put in the model, the more points you get, and the more points you get. If you get enough, you get an award. But that's another whole matter. But here's more pictures. He put tar paper roofing on the building. We're not really sure from the photo what it had. A lot of these old photos you work from are black and white, and so many of the textures are just, there's just no detail. Unfortunately, you don't get these crisp 8x10 glossy photos to work from. And I thought he put tar paper. Now there's shingles on it. Not sure really what he did. Maybe one part of each. But there's his roof. And he also started building the tower. Now this is where I find working with wood to be annoying. He had to cut out these windows very laboriously using a razor blade and chipping it away. I always split the wood. I know I can put masking tape and back to fix it. I don't know what Andy does, but there's a lot of cutting. The tower itself is a very delicate building. He had some styrene windows he was working with and putting them together. And we'll leave his. Now, if you can build your house of wood, you can also build your house of styrene. And styrene is every bit as strong, and the big bad wolf isn't going to blow it down. Now, I started out by showing some tools that I use. And some of them are very common. Some of them are very unusual. One of my favorites, this friend of art phase, Willie from the South, gave me these sanding sticks. And all he did is take some wet and dry sandpaper and some paint stirrers and glue them together. And they last for 1,000 years. The more they wear out, the better they seem to work. And a ruler. Proportional dividers are a neat tool. You have to scale plans rather than going from one drawing and reading dimension and going to another thing and transferring it. You could just take the measurements with the dividers. Then you need pliers for snapping the thing. You need screw cutters to cut things. This little square is from Micromark. It's a neat tool for both wood and plastic. It's a low profile square. So if you lay it on a piece of sheet material, it lies flush on the table. Then knives. Most people use X-Actos. I am going more and more to these big utility knives because they're easier to hold, the blades are sharp, and this is a cutter. It turns out that Midwest Hobby sells, the Micromark does, it was built for the automotive trades. It's built for upholstering and trimming and stuff, and it's fantastic. It'll cut through really thick material. I've gone up to maybe a quarter-inch, 3/8 inch material, and cuts you squarely and evenly. It has a miter bed so you can cut at angles, and I use that whenever I can. You can make a very rapid work of cutting things. And all those tools will work for wood too. Now, one of the beauties, rather than board by board, I buy a piece of evergreen board and batten siding, and I just lay the building out on the siding. Here's one wall cut out. One thing I will do to get the roofs even, when I draw the roofs, I will draw them like this, so the other one will be upside down. Can't do that with clapboard, but you can do it with certain materials, and that way the roof angles tend to be pretty even. Then here's the sides, and you get pencil lines all over it. They'll get painted. These scraps will be used later. They always come in handy, and after a while you have more scrap than good material. One of the beauties of styrene over wood is this score and snap. I first learned about it from John Nerrick, and he used it for masonry buildings, so his scorings and snappings would be covered by brick material. But often with wood, you can find a place to cut, like along the batten. There's usually a place when you're putting plastic doors and windows in where there's some place to cut it. But it takes a lot less time to cut. The cuts can be more even, more neat. And to use John's method, rather than cutting out a window, you would cut the whole window out. You would cut these down, snap it out, then glue the piece back in to the right size, trim that off later. See, you don't have to try to cut out the whole square. Same thing here, much like Andy does, you glue the corner posts in, cut them down, trim them, glue the pieces. Just always make, whenever you can, if you make an oversize and trim and sand them down, it makes it easier. Now, Andy has lots of bracing in his buildings, and with wood, you kind of need it. With wood, you probably have to paint both sides to prevent warping from moisture, but styrene's very inert. It only has to support itself up. So I usually put squaring blocks. These are some of those scraps in the roof. And sprues. The sprue pieces are just good for reinforcement in the corner. I don't know if they're necessary, but I like them. And a lot of times the piece will bow a little, so I just put a straight piece across somewhere to straighten out the bend in the side. And the buildings will stay up. They're waterproof. They're pretty indestructible. You could probably drop it off out of a window in a second-story building, and probably very little would happen to it. But here's the walls going together. You can use scrap. Since I only had a little piece here, I used some scrap and made the wall by sticking other pieces together. Here's the window piece with the roof sticking up. Just showing that you can do a lot of stuff like this you really could not do with wood. When Andy spent all his time with his deck, I used a piece of scribe siding. You could, if you want to, you could take X-Acto knives. George Sellios did a lot of this, and you would just kind of like take places out, cut places out like that. I pressed the button where I didn't mean to, but there was a deck on it. You probably saw the sprues while I was talking. One place I saved a lot of work, a lot of my 20% of the effort for 80% of the appearance was putting the fascia trim around the roof. Andy had a board-by-board roof, and he very laboriously put 2x10s or 2x8s around the trim. I just used an 80,000 piece of styrene, and it looks for all the world like a fascia. Maybe if you got your head under the eaves, you could see that it really wasn't hollow. And maybe in certain places you could. Jim Kelly made a joke about that in the model railroad, when he said when he had friends who had heads the size of golf balls would worry about that stuff. And instead, this is a very easy siding. Plastruct makes all sorts of building materials: brick, shingle, wood, just stone. They make all sorts of vacuum form material. The material's cheap, it looks nice. Once you put paint on, it looks fantastic. This is an HO rough shingle. I use that a lot. They make an asbestos shingle too. And here are the various parts ready to put together. The deck, the platform is ready to go in. I'm going to have the door open a little bit, so there's a little bit sticking in to look like a roof. The roof isn't on yet. Here's the door. The door is just a piece of styrene sheet. building was very simple. It only had like a tug and groove door, board and bat. And prototype did not have a window. I added one for interest just because I felt it would look better, and I wanted to demonstrate cutting the window too. And now it's painted. The color is boxcar red. It looks too brown in this picture, but photography it was what it is. And the more I tried to color balance it, the more everything else went off. But it is balanced to the white, and it's just painted. You know, you can do a lot with paint. It looks a lot better once it's painted. It becomes hard to tell if it's wood or not unless you get really close. And the only time you get really close is if the model is like an inch from the front or if it's in a contest. But once you get about a foot or 2 feet away, it becomes very difficult to tell what the material is made out of. The bottom is easy too. All my posts are a little bits of square styrene just stuck in the right place. And here's some of my scrap I used to brace it. This little scrap here is to hold that piece up. Now you can see the bottom of the deck. And I tend to overkill a bit with the bracing. Screws are cheap. Whenever I do build a styrene kit, I have a big box of screws. And I'll take the good pieces and clip them off. And after a while, you have more screwed than you know what to do with in all sizes. If you really not, I like to use the word frugal rather than cheap, but those who know me which way I really am, is you could go out and buy styrene rods from Evergreen. And that's, styrene also is a very inexpensive material. The roof is painted. All it really is paint and some chalk, just kind of rubbed over with my finger to bring out the texture. And it looks pretty good for what it is. A little bit of washes on it. Now, the building's finally weathered, and I ended up using pan pastels. And they're good for a lot of things because they're very quick. I've seen people who have never weathered anything take pan pastels and mess on some model for 5 minutes, and what they do comes out nice. It seems like you can do stuff really quickly. It seems to be intuitive enough that almost everybody can pick them up, and they're a good weathering material. You notice there is a little bit of a door open, and I glued a little piece in there. Like they would say, what detail, you know, and it's all there. The building is like the real one. There is the, I don't know, apron around the back, the side shown. It's a close model to the real one. And then I wanted to show a little bit about the tower because the building's a big, bulky thing, the shed. I'm not sure if that's a freight house or a storage shed, but the tower is a very delicate building with all the roofs and windows. So again, I would cut out the window, take that little piece, glue it back on. You can almost always find a place to cut along the board so it's not apparent that you've cut it. And then one final one, just to show how the walls are kind of put together. There are no windows yet. I would have to take styrene windows and cut them and gang them together to make the window. But that's the beginning of the tower. I never really did finish the tower because I really did that for this. Now, I'm pretty much done. And in closing, this is the prototype scene that Andy used for his picture and built the prototype model. It's called Milton Crossing. It's in Canada, somewhat west of Montreal, and I believe that's the Canadian Pacific branch line. So if that's that, then this is the Canadian National Main Line, but it's one of the two, and it was a picture that he based the scene on, and obviously the building's in the lower in the right corner. And I hope you enjoyed this. And I guess I'm about done too.
Michael, thank you. You are the king of frugal, and I just enjoy watching how you do it. And I'm real proud to say I've got a couple of your buildings on my layout, and it's just amazing to me. So thank you very much. I appreciate
You're welcome, and they didn't cost much either.
that. That's good to hear, especially for
Okay.
me. So
Well, thank you for having me, John.
thank you, Michael. I really appreciate it. So guys, our final presenter, Joe V, is going to show us how to scratch or kit bash and a little bit of a little bit what have you, based on a mentor of his. And we all probably know who once I say the name, Art Kieran, he just came up with stuff, and Joe will actually show you how it is all done. And Joe, let me just give you presentation rights. You are the presenter right now. So go ahead and make sure your sound is working, Joe. Yeah, I see your screen. And just unmute your line, Joe.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. You've got it. Take it away.
Okay, let me get to the screen. And here we go. Well, first of all, I was brought up with trains as a child. Basically, we all got them for around the Christmas tree, and that was the beginning. Plywood Central, you know, the 4x8 sheet, and you dealt with it. As I got older, I was still interested in it, and remember spending many a afternoon going down to the rail yard in Fresh Pond, Glendale, New York, to go ahead and watch the Long Island Railroad switch out cars. My parents took me down, and that was a treat. Then from that, we got into a little larger 2 4x8 sheets down in the basement, and had a layout down there. And unfortunately, we decided to take the layout down. Actually, it was my father that decided to take it down and redo the room, but the layout never was put back. So I guess becoming an armchair modeler was more than was the right term. Once I entered college, I went ahead and had gone over to a hobby shop and came upon this magazine. And this is from my collection. I still have the original magazine, and it's in pretty good shape. This is where I had seen the ad or the banner for oddly shaped buildings. Art was a big fan of kit bashing, and this was the article that drew me to Art's work. Currently, I live up in Ware, and starting to get a room set up to build a layout. And one of the sections would be with buildings that Art had done. I went ahead and perused this article, I don't know how many times, and basically if I only put that much effort into my studies, it would have been a little bit different. But at any rate, I found that Art didn't give in the RMC days at the beginning very concise directions. So it was rather tough to try to recreate his buildings. I've recreated quite a number of them, and have even started to write articles on how to do them. So what I came across that I thought for this presentation was this little diorama that Art built, calling Building the Buildings That Aren't There. And he was interested in pointing out this building here and this building here, basically empty lots. Well, I fell in love with this one because it was rather easy to do and kind of interesting. It's nothing more than two of the AHM, Tyco, IHC interlocking tower kits. And the first 2 floors are the main tower, and then you would just cut off the top floor off of your second kit and assemble. So with that in mind, here we go. First cuts, as they say, first cuts are the deepest. Went ahead and started to make the slice lines to score this, to basically snap it. And now I have the top section and the bottom section. Art must have had a collection of leftover kit parts. So I got a couple of tubs from Walmart, and this went into the tub, and this went into building the building. Went ahead and sanded the top piece so that I would have a rough area for the glue to work, and also to make sure that this was nice and smooth. Did the same thing with the bottom. And then laid out the 4 pieces that were necessary. In this case, it's 8, but the 4 sides, laid them out on a mat. And here they are separated so you can see what goes to what. And I also, just looking at this, could imagine that you could swap these around too. You didn't have to do them the way how Art did them. Then I went ahead and test fit them. Now I've put some glue on here and moved it over so that when the glue was ready to work its magic on the plastic and melt it, I could slide this over and line it up. And then using the grid lines on the mat would be able to get it into alignment. And there we go. Found that the Fala Expert or Super Expert glue is a good product to use for this. And then decided that this section on the main building had to be painted. So using painter's tape, taped everything off. Using a knife, made sure to remove the little extra that's there, and then took it out to the backyard and sprayed it. Once the tape was removed, this is what you have. Now the decorations and windows are all together in the kit, and they are molded in brown plastic. But since these are not identical kits, and when I'm saying identical, unfortunately, in my stash, I was able to use one from Tyco and another one from IHC. So different colors of plastic. And what I did was just sprayed those also. Remove the front door on the one piece. And there's a reason for that, and we'll show that to you a little later on. Rating another kit, this one, the Engineering Works by Pola, also known as the Gruesome Casket Company. I was able to get these windows. Now, Art's done a lot of work with that one particular building, and I know for a fact that he had a whole bunch of these windows. Again, removing the interlocking tower window, because this section is going to be used for fill-ins. I now started to work on the stairway going up to the second floor on the tower. Art did not put in any poles, uprights on the bottom. I decided to go ahead and put them in and used 6x6 styrene for that. I next took the handrails and started to cut these apart to make the handrail. Taking that outside, sprayed that, the brown, and then attached it to the side. I finally took the whole structure and spray painted it with Krylon matte out of a rattle can, and that killed the plastic sheen on the tower itself. Started to put together the front, and now this seam and this seam over here will be hidden with ivy, which was one of Art's favorite tricks. He wrote an article of making walls out of ivy, in which all that he did was took plain styrene, cut holes in it for the windows, may have put windows in, which he's done on most of them, and then filled the entire wall with styrene, with ivy, thereby expanding the kit an extra couple of feet or maybe a whole section. In the back, since the first floor I'm going to make as a restaurant or cafe, this is the cooking section. And again, the Engineering Works Gruesome Casket Company supplied that. Now what I did was I cut this little section out, and you get these two little bricks. Well, if you turn them over, they show the scoring of the bricks. That scoring, those pieces are going to be used in the empty lot where the building was torn down. And I was just in Hobby Lobby the other day, and they carry a brown, almost like a brick color ballast. And the smaller pieces of the particles look good to go ahead and use as brick dust that you would have found when a building would be demolished. Using styrene, just built up the sides of the windows. And then, while I was at one of the shows last year, the Springfield show, I came upon this company, Roomettes, and had bought a whole bunch of the interiors. Well, there's nothing that says they have to go into the building that they're selling them for. And so, sitting down with all of the collection that I had of the Roomettes, I decided to see what would fit in this tower to give it some type of interest. This lamp, by the way, came from the Dollar Tree. I was over at the Dollar Tree as the adult playground or the adult toy store where you can get things cheap. I managed to find some hashtags and some letters, etc., that they were selling, obviously, for $1. They had a string of 18 LED lights. So what I did was I looked for the ones that had the maximum number and picked them up. Managed to acquire a total of 20 of these hashtags. Everyone thought I was nuts. But if you go ahead, you can see here's the string of lights. Put that into the building, the cardboard scene, and it illuminates the room very nicely. This can also be pulled up so that it's not hanging as low. Well, the only problem with that is that you get bleed through of light. Well, nothing that Dollar Tree electrical tape can't handle. So tape the entire box with the electrical tape, and that eliminated the light from coming through. Here's basically the completed model. Unfortunately, I have not gotten the interiors in, but this is a rough idea of what it's going to look like. It still needs a little work. I have to put the sign in up front, the signs, fill these little holes in, set the roof. The roof is not set right now because of the fact that I need to do the interior. There's the little kitchen area for cooking. The main roof, I have to put some more goodies on. It's too bland as far as I'm concerned. It needs some vent pipes, get some tall lines in there, etc. And that's the end of the presentation. By the way, I had gone ahead and when I lived down in New York, the NMRA club that I belonged to was the Sunrise Trail Division. And much to my lack of knowledge, I never realized it, but Art was also a member of that club, and a lot of my friends down there knew Art personally. Seeing that I had done quite a number of Art current buildings, I had entered into a contest that they ran, and one of the buildings that I entered was an Art Curran building. Not knowing what the outcome was going to be, I became the first recipient of the Art Curran Kit Bashing Award, and received a model to display for a year. Unfortunately, it had to be returned. And then a year subscription to Model Railroader magazine as the prize. As far as I know, I don't think anyone else has ever accomplished doing an Art Curran kit bash for them. But that's my history. That's my story, and I'm going to stick to it.
That was great, Joe. Thank you so much. I love seeing how various folks and designs. I could do that all day. Go over somebody's layout and say, "How'd you do that?" I find that for me most rewarding because you just pick up idea after idea after idea. So thank you very much. And guys, that wraps it up. A couple of you asked where Steve Murphy was. He's been moved to the next show and tell at his choice because he's just swamped with work. He tells me he's the only one who still has a full-time job. Everybody else is retired, but that's not exactly true. But the next show and tell is 3 weeks from tonight. It is actually on the 22nd of July. I have just one presenter. If anybody here wants to present, send me an email and let me know. We usually do 4 or 5, and we'll go from there. One last chance at the pictures. Name the 4 layouts in the pictures. 2 of the layouts, hint, hint, are no longer around. But if you just do a screenshot collection of this, it'll be in the recording anyway. But if you just hit Control P, it'll and then paste that somewhere, you'll get a screenshot of what's currently on your screen. And you could study it and see. But if you look at the close-ups of some of these, it's going to kind of give it away. So if you guess all 4, you'll win 3 commemorative cars, 2017, 2018, 20, and 2020. So thank you, guys. We had, I think, some people came and went, but I think we had pretty close to about 47 total. I'll be able to see in the stats afterwards, but I appreciate the time you guys have taken. It was a little bit longer tonight, but it was very interesting. So that's always a good thing. And we'll see you in 3 weeks, but we'll send out emails. Don't forget, if you want to present, let me know. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much, guys. Take care. Have a good night, everyone.